The Crystal Keepers. Chapter 8. Lost in Time. Minutes passed like hours as every footfall drew pain. Manny tried to ignore the cold, keeping near the wall of the cliff that stretched endlessly into darkness. She walked to the rhythm of her leather boots crunching against frozen snow. The lack of energy from overusing her powers was becoming more apparent by the second. She wondered in silence if this was all just a dream, just a feverish blur of imagination. Was she still safe, asleep back in the dusty tavern, waiting for Daniel to return with dinner? Or was she really out here? How could she return from this? The truth was that Daniel was likely dead, and if the royal army found the secret staircase, then Bree, Fitzel, and Julius would be back in Denengir in no time, to rejoin the remnants of her king's prison of jars. What then? How would she ever get them back? Manny tried to ignore those thoughts. Hypothermia was setting in. She needed to get warm and dry as soon as possible. She thought about using her lightning to start a small fire, but she knew if she tried now, she would just fall unconscious from the pain. She noticed what felt like a hollow chamber inside her head, as if she hadn't slept for days. She was struggling just to string complete thoughts together. Ahead, the cliff finally grew shorter until ending at a natural platform about 40 feet up. At the base of the cliff was a path that led to a few rocks that could be used as stairs. Manny approached and climbed. When she reached the top step, she dug her fingers into the snow and hauled herself up onto the ridge. Rolling to her back, Manny lay there for a moment just to breathe. She felt like a frozen sack of potatoes that had been kicked around for the last few hours. Her fingers ached from digging them into the cold snow, and her arms burned from the bruises and scrapes. All that had gone on felt like a nightmare, like something inverted from the truth. "This wasn't supposed to happen," Manny said to herself in agony. She shivered so violently that she could hardly breathe. She remembered the fireplace in her bedroom at the top of the lonely tower. As much as she longed for freedom before, now that she had gained it, Manny missed the safety of her cage. She released a white breath of despair and tucked her hands into her sleeves, curling up to try and get warm. Slowly, Manny's shivering dimmed and she felt more calm. A blanket of heat slipped over her body while the wind in the trees became as relaxing as a lullaby. Manny felt herself drifting away to her dreams, as if time and space were folding in on itself. She thought maybe she could continue after a short nap, after a bit of rest. "Only a few minutes," she told herself. "Only a few minutes." Scene change. Manny jolted back to consciousness after what was far more than just a few minutes. Her ears were ringing and her heart was pounding, caused by what sounded like a massive explosion only seconds before. In the distance, large branches were cracking and snapping as something heavy fell from the trees. She could hear labored panting and horrifying groaning after every collision. It finally came to an end in a loud thump against the snow. Another explosion, then Manny rose back to a sitting position. She wiped a layer of snow off her legs as she climbed to her feet. There was a storm blowing over, and every snowflake for miles was being lit by purple flashes of lightning behind distant booms of thunder. Every few seconds it would blast off again, instantaneously letting Manny know the severity of her situation. Her shivering had gotten so bad that she could hardly move. Her robe had become stiff and frozen, making her clothes feel as delicate as glass. It was extremely cold here, more so than she had ever dealt with. If she couldn't get to a fire soon, she wasn't going to make it back to Daniel at all, and the crystal would be lost forever. "Hello?" Manny focused on the groaning sound again, attempting to discern where it was coming from. She squinted through the falling snow, but it was too dark to see. With a swipe and a grunt, a massive force ripped at Manny's arm. She screamed as the collision knocked her into a pile of snow nearby. She brushed frost off her face as pain filtered into focus. Shocking, burning jolts streamed straight to her head. Maney was horrified and awestruck, unable to completely decide what had happened. She rolled to her back and clutched her right shoulder, feeling hot liquid pour over her frozen fingers in great quantities. She looked to the place where she had been standing before and noticed a large, shadowy object lurching into view. It was groaning with hungry rage, and every step sounded like a hammer striking the earth. A purple bolt of lightning ripped across the sky, lighting the forest once again, and Maney immediately realized that the approaching dark object was a massive, hungry brown bear. Maney flung her arm towards the animal, and a bolt of blue lightning snapped out from the center of her left palm. The bolt collided with the bear and exploded, throwing the creature across the forest in a glowing ball of red fire and black smoke. Flashes and firelight enveloped the clearing in the trees as the bear struck a trunk beside a nearby snowdrift and went limp. The area became illuminated in a circle of dancing orange light. Maney paused in the silence, watching the creature crackle and burn. Once she was satisfied, she tried to lift her arm, but it had no strength. The limb felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. She struggled to even roll, but she couldn't do that either. Only a few feet away was fire, warmth, life, and here she felt hot liquid bubbling out of her arm like a thick pulsing waterfall. Maney couldn't help herself anymore. She broke down, just like the night it happened, the night she left Denengir, the night her life was stolen. "Why is this happening?" she screamed, though her scream had such weakness to it that it could hardly be considered a scream at all. "It's not my fault." Maney was disappointed in herself. Tears broke from her eyes in a relentless stream of sadness. She could feel the trails of water turning to ice and freezing against her face. Painful waves were shooting up her spine. "Veronica, I'm sorry," she said in regret. Maney knew there was only one other person in the world who could comprehend how she felt at this exact moment. To be helpless, lying in a broken pile like a used-up toy. A thing that meant nothing and could do nothing to change that fact. Maney watched as the edges of her vision closed in. How unfair it felt. How betrayed she thought she was. Her face smoothed over with a feeling of numbness, and within seconds, her body was gone too. Maney could feel nothing anymore, and before she could comprehend what was happening, her vision died away to complete blackness. As Maney lay there, dying in the snow, she became aware of a sliding sensation drifting up her once working body. Her arms felt strained, and unbelievably, warmth radiated into her skin once more. And it was real warmth this time, not the kind a dying mind creates as its last moments approached, but actual heat from a fire. As the soothing wash of feeling came back to her, so too did the pain in her wounded shoulder. A sharp stab, then Maney snapped back to consciousness once again. Maney sat up straight, sucked in a rapid breath of air, then released it in one of the most painful screams she had ever let loose. She fully believed someone had tried to cut off her arm just then. When Maney finally stopped screaming, her throat felt raw. She looked down to her right shoulder, which she was sure would be attached to a bloody nub, and noticed 4 deep gouges ripping across her purple and blue arm. Tiny trails of blood streamed down with every new heartbeat. Nearby was a blonde-haired boy sitting on his hands in the snow. He looked terrified and young, maybe 15 years old. "What are you doing?" Maney demanded between her winces of pain. She noticed a bloody rag and bottle of clear liquid beside each other. The bottle was marked isopropyl. "I was just trying to help you. I'm sorry." Maney looked at her arm once again. The sleeve had been cut off. She looked at the bright, cozy fire enveloping the bear's body only a few feet away. Nearby were a few shredded and bloody black strips of cloth. "Here, you need this." The boy leaned forward and wrapped a thin white bandage around Maney's arm. He tied the end tight, and Maney sucked a breath of air from the pain. Sorry. Too tight, I guess? Yeah, too tight. The boy loosened the bandage and leaned back. So, are you okay? When I came back a few hours ago, you were darn near an icicle. I'm surprised you're alive at all. The boy had an odd accent, one Maney had never heard before. Beside him lay a long metallic tube with a wooden handle attached. I'm fine. Thanks for helping me. Maney was annoyed by the boy's strangely careless attitude, especially after she had come so close to death. She tried to get up, and barely succeeded. What you gonna do now? I have to go back for Daniel. Who's Daniel? Your boyfriend? The boy sounded discouraged. No, he's just my... Maney felt around her neck for the chain, but Mikhail's crystal was gone. She could hardly believe it was true. Panic flooded her senses. Had she lost it when the bear attacked? Or maybe... She looked at the boy and glared. Where's my crystal? The boy looked as if he'd seen his own death in her eyes. I took it, in case you were dead. Maney walked up to the boy and stuck out her hand. She couldn't comprehend why he would admit to taking it. It was almost like he was trying to threaten her. Give it to me. Now. The boy shivered. He slapped his chest pockets frantically. He reached inside each, pulling out nothing but air, pocket after pocket. Maney grew impatient. You're about 5 seconds away from me taking it myself, off of your charred, smoky corpse. The boy scrambled to his feet and reached inside his pants pocket. He then tossed Mikhail's crystal to the ground in front of Maney as if he had known its location the entire time. He stood back and grabbed his metal tube device from the snow, pointing the tip of its hollow metal barrel towards Maney's chest. Now you just stay back, you hear? I came out to help you, not get in a fight. If you were dead, you didn't need it anyway. Maney approached the boy and ripped the tube device from his hands. What is this thing? Some fancy toy? She flung the device into the forest. The boy stared back out of terrified eyes. I saw what you did to the bear, he stammered. Maney grabbed the boy's collar. She raised her free hand threateningly towards his face. Did you now? Then how about a close-up demonstration? Maney threw a bright red lightning bolt across the forest and into a nearby tree, creating a fiery, crackling explosion that shot splinters in every direction, whistling and snapping as they tore through foliage and icicles. A cloud of flames drifted into the canopy of the pine forest, causing the night to shine bright. Snaps and pops filled the frozen air as branches burned. Maney released the boy's shirt and let him fall back to the hard snow. She took a few steps away from him. Howling wind, appearing out of nowhere, streamed in a wide arcing circle around the top of the icy ridge. Snow was bursting into fine layers of mist in each blast. Don't you ever tell anyone I was here, or I'll kill you. The boy's eyes became as wide as an owl's. He jolted to his feet and ran, deep into the forest of pine trees. Maney saw that he left behind his metal tube device and bottle of clear liquid. She felt sorry for causing so much fear, but was relieved nonetheless at the sight of his departure. Maney wobbled from foot to foot in the heavy winds as she tried to stay standing. Her head was swimming, and she could hardly see straight, but at least she was alive. She could thank the boy for that. The gusts swirling through the trees increased in intensity, approaching the level of a small tornado, snapping columns of blue hair into Maney's eyes every few seconds like tiny whips. She kept wiping them away, but the wind was growing stronger, making each attempt futile. She grabbed Mikhail's crystal from the ground and held the stone between her thumb and index finger. Inside was the same black abyss from before, mocking her. After all that had happened with the boy and the bear, Maney knew she couldn't stay in this world for much longer. She turned and headed for the cliff. She had climbed to get to the ridge before. There she saw her footprints leading up from the rocks below. Slowly, she approached the edge. As Maney got close to the cliff's rim, wind poured over her back like an icy wave, freezing through her layers of developed warmth. She shivered as she kneeled to crawl down. In that same moment, Maney heard a strange sound echo and curl through the forest behind her, like a woman's voice screaming through the trees. She turned back to face the sound and saw no one, just dancing shadows in the orange light behind the trees. But then her eyes focused on a rolling wave of white dust coming towards her. By the time she could even raise her arms in defense, it was already too late. The blast struck, and Maney was thrown back first over the top of the ridge. Maney couldn't breathe. Her mind became numb with terror. Sweat poured from her palms. All she could do was scream as she plummeted towards the ground below, relentlessly imagining the pain she was about to feel. She squeezed Mikhail's crystal as tight as her fingers would allow, her thoughts drifting back to the tower in Deningir, to the broken body that lay silent and still at the bottom of her bedroom window. "I'm sorry," Maney pleaded, seemingly towards the crystal. There was agony, but also acceptance in her voice, as if she thought her fate to be unavoidable at this point. Maney nearly believed she deserved what was about to happen. A few blue sparks cracked out of the darkness in response, but in the end, nothing happened. It seemed her last-minute regrets weren't enough to incur a reaction. Maney closed her eyes, crossed her arms, and waited for whatever might happen next. Seconds later, without a single thing left to do, Maney slammed full speed into the rocks below. End of chapter.